My group is the Freethinkers Living Sober group up in Cottonwood, beautiful downtown Cottonwood, Arizona. And we have 4 meetings a week. We have a Thursday morning breakfast meeting and a Friday noon meeting and a Monday noon meeting. And then we have in Cornville, we have a 5:30 meeting that's part of our group, led by my buddy Sean and his lovely wife, Suzanne. I wanted to talk a little bit about area and how area works here. And then Beth is going to talk a little bit about service work at the intergroup level here. And then Fred will follow up with whatever the hell he's going to talk about. We don't know for sure. I'm sorry. Is hell a swear word? I'm not sure. Oh, okay. So, I've been involved in service work for a fairly long time, although when I went to graduate school, I had to stop for a while. The area here, the Area 3 for Arizona, is what happens when a GSR goes to areas, they get assigned to a panel. There are 9 panels, and they cover things like treatment, public information, cooperation with the professional community, corrections, that kind of thing. So when somebody brings a motion to the area, the panels will get that, and then the people in the panels will vote. So one of my pet peeves is, and I think peeve is an okay word, one of my pet peeves is that, I used to swear never mind, is I read online a lot of times people complaining about AA is like this and AA is like that and AA does this and AA this, as if AA were some big monolithic, thing that all AA is like this. That's not been my experience. I've lived all over the country, traveled all over the country, gone to meetings a lot of different places, and even though you'll hear people in AA say, well, I went to a meeting and meetings everywhere are the same, I feel so welcome, and well, they haven't been to a lot of the meetings I've been to, because there's been a lot of difference between meetings in various places in the country and various meetings in the same town. My experience of AA is that it's a very grassroots thing. And if you want to change it, instead of just complain about it, the way to do that is in service. Which is why I wanted to talk about doing service in AA, because I think it's really important for secular meetings to have GSRs who are active and willing to participate. And I'll give you one example of why I think that's true. I brought a motion to the area requesting that we have a secular type listing in the area meeting list and the online meeting list, SE for secular. And to me, that was like, it's no big deal. Although I remember a time when I was in service back in the 80s when there was a big controversy about whether you should have a separate listing for gay and lesbian meetings. So I did that. The problem is this. I only participated in the corrections panel. Now, I was asked actually to come to one of the other panels as the author of the motion and talk to them about what this was about and why we should even have something like that. They had taken a straw poll in that panel, and they were voting 14-4 against allowing that designation to exist. I went in there and talked to them, and all I did was share my heart with them about why secular meetings, what they mean, and why we need the designation, and they voted 14-4 in favor. This is why, now it's not me, it's because they had to hear from a person what was going on, okay? Here's some of the objections that I heard to why a secular listing was unnecessary. All meetings are already secular. The designation would imply that other meetings aren't secular, that they're religious. Here's another one. Why even have a special designation? Why not use atheist or agnostic instead? You should just use the word secular in the meeting name. AA is all about God. How can you have a secular meeting? Now, keeping in mind that they'd already told us that it was already secular. Anyway, here's the best one. It would confuse the newcomer. That's like the objection that's the stop all. Why don't you just start your own program and borrow the steps and traditions from AA? So those are the kinds of objections that were coming up. What I suggested to the group that I got to talk to was that secular is a designation for a lot of different types of meetings. We have atheist meetings, we have agnostic meetings, we have ours is a Freethinkers meeting. They're not all the same. The one thing they have in common is they are all secular. In fact, Augustine is the one, if you'll pardon my religious background, Augustine is the one who kind of set out the parameters of what secular faith and religious faith were about. That religious faith is about after you're dead, and secular faith is about living here and now, you know. After talking with them and really just sharing my heart and saying, hey, they wanted us to use a different name for the designation rather than secular. I said, well, it's not up to me to make that different name. This is something that the secular community has decided to do. Now, if I had had even 4 or 5 other GSRs at different panels to be able to present the case, instead of having what ended up happening was 5 panels voted against it and 4 panels voted for it. I needed 6 panels to vote for it. If we could have just gotten a couple more panels to vote for it, it would have gone to the floor. And then the floor would have had to vote on it. If they voted it down, I would have been able to give a minority report and talk about secular meetings. That's just one instance of why I think it's really important for secular people, for the secular groups, to have a GSR, that actually will go to those assemblies and participate. I know it's boring a lot of times. I get bored in them. I know that sometimes it's a real pain in the ass because I got to go spend a weekend doing something that's not about me. I don't get to watch my television shows. I don't get to lay around. The things that I really prefer doing, to tell you the truth, I don't get to go sit in a meeting and talk about myself. I have to sit there and listen to a bunch of people give opinions that I disagree with, and I don't get to answer them. However, for me, if we really want AA to change, and it has changed over the years, if we really want AA to change, the way to do it is from the ground up. Because despite all the complaints I hear all the time about how AA does this and AA does that, it's really about the grassroots. It really is about bottom up. And believe it or not, we have a lot of support out there from people who are believers, who recognize that we need to keep an open tent. So I'm here preaching this from this pulpit because I need you guys to help. You know, not just me, but I think the whole secular movement does. I'm not going to talk about PRASA, maybe Fred will talk about PRASA, but there's a lot of support in AA in general at the service level for secular meetings and for the idea of atheists, agnostics, and freethinkers to be able to have their place in Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of support. If you've ever read the PRASA reports from the last couple of years, you'll see, well, the fact that they came out with this the God Word, and the God Word went through faster than anything I've ever seen before. So I'm just asking you for your support. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Beth, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. So I have not been involved in service work ever since I got sober, any higher than the group level. That is because I was 28 years sober before I ever heard one single other person admit they were staying sober without a higher power. And up until then, I sort of felt like an imposter in AA, and how can I possibly get involved when, they're going to think I'm something I'm not. I already had that imposter syndrome going on, a few other levels, but AA became another one. I'm not a real AA member, and they wouldn't want me if they knew what I really think, So, but I am a founding member of the We Agnostics group in Tempe, which is my home group, and we elected, I became the first intergroup rep for that group. If you don't know what an intergroup is, they're also called, in some areas, they're called a central office. These are not affiliated with the AA general service structure. They don't rise any higher than the local level. They're independent entities. And generally what an intergroup or central office does is put out a print meeting list. They have a website usually. They will have a 24-hour hotline that, a number that people can call and always get to speak to another alcoholic. They have committees that do different things like public information and cooperation with the professional community. We have a unity committee which visits groups that aren't sending representatives to the meeting and asks them if they'd like to participate. And then intergroups also put on sometimes regular events and also special events. So each AA group has a right to elect a representative to attend the intergroup business meeting, and you can make motions and you can take things back to your group to vote on. So that is the structure that I infiltrated. It's the East Valley Intergroup, which covers the east half of the greater Phoenix area, and it's big. They list over 600 meetings a week. So it's a large intergroup. We had no issues at all with them listing our meetings like has happened in some other places. And in fact, on the website, we're listed as a secular meeting. If any of you are familiar with the Meeting Guide app, there's a secular filter, and we show up under the secular filter on the Meeting Guide app. Now I know Phoenix has a different intergroup, Salt River Intergroup, and they don't use a secular filter in their meeting, so you can't find us that way for the Phoenix half of the valley. Our print list still doesn't have the secular designation, and that's not really based on any prejudice. It's based on there's so many different things already. We want the meeting list to fit on one piece of paper. The print's getting really small, and I think pretty soon they will be able to. One of the first things I did as the intergroup rep was give the hotline chairperson a list of the secular meetings, so when they have people that call in that don't want to have anything to do with God, to be able to let them know that there's a secular option. And our registrar back there, Ed, he was the chairperson for a couple of years, and he got them to stop closing the business meetings with the Lord's Prayer. So anyhow, after I got kind of comfortable just being an intergroup rep, I volunteered to the person that had taken on the hotline commitment wasn't doing very well and they needed to replace him, and so I volunteered for that. So I've been the phone committee chair for 3.5 years now of my 2-year commitment. But because of signing up to do that and having to attend all the meetings and give a report, I just got more comfortable. I wasn't comfortable in AA until I went to Santa Monica, really, and met people that, like, hey, I'm not alone anymore, like what you're supposed to feel like right when you walk in the door. But I didn't feel like it until I walked into secular. One of the things that my group did, we agnostics in Tempe, we created this trifold brochure that's called What is Secular Alcoholics Anonymous? I hope you will pick some up. They're over there on the table and they're free. We had money left over from the conference 2 years ago, and we got a whole bunch of them printed up with the conference money. I do have to make an announcement about it. Our website has changed. It's now azseculara.org. However, if you type in the address on here, it will forward you to the correct website. But on the back, this email address, it doesn't get forwarded. The email address is admin@azseculara.org. And you can get to that through the website. And also about the 2020 conference, we have a link to it on our website. I guess Greg didn't bring anything with him, but if you registered online, you maybe saw a flyer for that, and that's linked to the site so there's another way to get to that. Okay, so I asked if my intergroup would be willing to hand out this pamphlet, and they said, no, they only provide AA literature and also a few pamphlets that the intergroup itself has written and approved. But at the business meetings, people bring in, there's a back table where people bring in flyers of event roundups or campouts or whatever events, and pretty much anyone can put anything there AA related. So I began bringing stacks of these and putting them on the table at the intergroup. What happens when you do that is the intergroup reps, it's kind of their job to bring this stuff back to their group, right? So they're picking up all these flyers of, they're having a roundup, they're having a camp out, there's a potluck meeting, and it's like, here's secular AA. And so it made its way back into many, many different groups just by doing that. And I've been at other meetings, and they have our flyer going around, and I'm like, oh, cool. Anybody that wants, if you can download the flyer from our website too, and it does have the email and web addresses corrected. And also, if you want to make one that's for your area that doesn't say Arizona or whatever on it, you can contact me. I'd be happy. It's a Microsoft Publisher document, and I can send it to you. So my email address, does anybody want it? Free. It's a BHOUCK 4 @cox.net. Just the 4. It's BHOUCK 4 @cox.net. So this year, I also put a stack of our conference flyers on that table, and they got taken back to all the different groups. Along with, I put the pamphlet and the flyer for the upcoming conference, and that got distributed back to the home groups, everybody's home groups that were attending the meeting. Too. East Valley Intergroup hosts a few regular and special events every month. They have a dinner and speaker meeting on the first Friday of the month, and they pass around a sign-up sheet for a different group to host that each month. So we agnostics hosted it one time last year, and we're going to be hosting it again in April. When we did that, it was, to my knowledge, it's the first time ever that we bring the food, we put on the meeting, we provide the speakers. We did not read how it works. We did not close with the Lord's Prayer. We did our own meeting, and the feedback I got was pretty good. The speakers did not bash God or regular AA. They just talked about their own experience, and wasn't really offensive to anyone, I don't think. And it was just a good way to show that, hey, number one, we're doing service work, and hey, here's what our meeting looks like. It's not all that crazy, and it was just a good opportunity. the East Valley Intergroup also hosts a sponsorship workshop every 2 months, and I think we ought to sign up to host one of those too, because exactly what Mary read out of the sponsorship pamphlet, that it says, don't force your beliefs on anyone. Besides, many alcoholics have stayed sober without any belief in a higher power. See, they have a rule that you're supposed to use AA literature when you do the sponsorship workshop, but we've got literature that supports us. So every year there's a big conference that for the United States and Canada that's comprised of intergroup and central office managers, and they go to like seminars on rules about anonymity and budgeting for books and just all kinds of, a lot of mundane office management stuff. Last year it was in Montreal, and this year it was in Mesa. It was at a hotel, so they have a hospitality suite, just like at many conferences. They passed around a sign-up sheet for people to, for groups to fill a time slot hosting the hospitality sheet. I signed us up. We went. We talked to office managers and central office managers from all over the country about secular AA, and most of them were pretty receptive. I also put a stack of these and of our flyers for the conference on the table there. So that was another way of getting the word out. People took those. I heard that at least one person heard about our conference from somebody that came back to their state from that meeting. Another thing we have a CICPC PICPC stands for Public Information and Cooperation with the Professional Community. We have a committee in our intergroup that does that, and since I'm also on a committee, it's easy to interface with other committee people. And every year in Phoenix, there's a recovery trade show, which is a lot of for-profit and treatment centers and stuff, but it's called The Art of Recovery, and it's at the convention center, and there's booths, but our little committee always hosts an AA booth there, and for the last 2 years, they have been willing to hand out our flyers along with the AA ones. I offered to help sit in the booth for some hours if they need somebody to do that, and they didn't, but they were just willing to hand out our stuff. Members of other intergroups, like John uses this pamphlet through his intergroup, and we've been trying to get some to Tucson. And if you don't have something like this that you can just hand out, I recommend it, because it's a lot easier than talking to everyone, and it gets around. And I heard just on the online that another group in another, I think in Wisconsin, or I don't remember the state, but had purchased a lot of copies of the God Word pamphlet. The group purchased the copies. They made a little sticker with the name of their group and their meeting time and attached those to the pamphlets. And then they gave them back to the intergroup to hand out for free. So that's just another idea. The International Women, this isn't really intergroup, but this is just how opportunistic I am. The International Women's Conference, I've been to it a few times. It moves around every year, but it's like 2,000 women in AA, and they were in Phoenix 2 years ago, and I contacted them and said, can we do an agnostic panel? And somebody else also did, so we got to have a presence there. My therapist asked me for copies of the trifold to give to her, some of her other patients. Just be opportunistic. That's, where you see a place where you can get in. That's what I've been doing.
Alcoholic, my name's Fred. See a guitar over there that makes me feel a little more at home? Welcome to the lady from Smart Recovery. I say alcoholic, my name is Fred, so I don't have to say I am an alcoholic. Thank you, Jeff. So thanks to a power greater than alcohol that I found at AA, I haven't found it necessary to pick up a drink for a long time. I don't know what that power is. I think it's maybe lies in interpersonal neurobiology. One drunk talking to another. seriously, it's how I stayed sober. I came to this secular viewpoint fairly late in my recovery. I started out with a blinding flash experience. And then over time, I came to realize that I don't know what that is, and I don't have the capacity to know what that is, and that was important. And I've been doing service for a long time. I had a home group elected me GSR. They sent me to all the assemblies and all that kind of stuff. I've been to 20 Area 03 assemblies. It sounds like a lot. Some people, Vicky B, has been to 120 consecutive assemblies. So I kind of thought I would talk about the last assembly, which happened just up the road, to kind of talk about what it's like. Now, I'm currently serving as a General Service Representative, the GSR, for the Eye Opener group in Cottonwood, Arizona. I was approached by the elder statesman, bleeding deacon, because the GSR stepped away. He just couldn't stand it anymore because it's a group of alcoholics in a room arguing. He was having a hard time. So I went to the assembly, and I wanted just to talk specifically about what happened at this assembly, which just happened last week. It was over on Peoria Drive or Road, whatever it is, at the Sheraton, to kind of give you guys from Phoenix some context. But before I get into that, I had some things that I wanted to make sure that I said, so I want to read those off this card. Number one, the problem is not the General Service Office. The GSO, the bottom of AA, when you talk about, those people are very sympathetic to the secular movement and understand very clearly the damage that's been done. And consequently, the Grapevine has been really powerful. They've, published the One Big Tent book. The pamphlet came quickly. So I wanted to make clear that GSO is on our side, but GSO is powerless because the groups are who actually runs things. And that was evident to me because at this assembly, when I went to the speaker meeting, the speaker was a recently, I don't want to say departed, but he was the last at-large General Service trustee from Canada, which was really cool because he talked about process and things like that. But I heard from him, one of the things he was talking, and he said, this God thing isn't it, because Bill and Bob, they didn't, they had that, and they couldn't stay sober. Now, this is coming out of the mouth of a trustee of the General Service Board, so they know. Another thing I want to emphasize is the importance of Grapevine and encourage everyone to write your experience in an article to the Grapevine, because what they probably do is they have a stack of stories and they said, I need 400 words, and then they'll look, and if your story's in the 400-word stack, they'll grab it, put it in. So write your story to the Grapevine. The Grapevine, being the journal of the fellowship, is where the current thinking of the fellowship is revealed. The big book's not going to change. We know that. I mean, we just have to understand we're not going to rewrite the big book. But every month, the Grapevine is published, and that's an opportunity for us to share our experience of getting sober in a non-theistic approach. The place where I came across the failure of Alcoholics Anonymous was doing work in hospitals and institutions, because that's where I heard, I tried AA and I can't stand the God stuff. People who come to regular AA don't hear that. They don't get it. They don't see the failure. All they see is, what I hear is God drives them out, the bottle brings them back. unless it kills them. So in any case, a good area to look at maybe carrying a message is into hospitals, institutions, treatment centers, because that's where you may come across a newcomer who says, man, I can't stop drinking. I wish AA would work, but I can't stand the God stuff. So that's a forefront. That's a beachhead for newcomers who are struggling. They find themselves back in jail, back in a treatment center for the 14th time. I sponsored a guy who went 54 times, so 14 is not that much of an exaggeration. So I wanted to talk about H&I and the importance of H&I as a service opportunity, and it's a place where I learned, and it's why I moved into trying to carry a message of hope and recovery to atheist agnostics, because they would show up and they couldn't make it in AA. There was one meeting in Tucson that was an atheist meeting, and I attended that meeting for about 6 weeks, and what I found was the leader of the meeting just hated the big book, and that's all he talked about. And so there wasn't any recovery, and I saw 2 different people come. They started coming, but that negative message was not helping them. So that was an important thing, and so I decided to start a meeting. And luckily, I was doing service at the central office in Tucson. I was doing 1 shift a week, go down 4 hours, and sit and wait for a phone call, and never got one. But I talked with the central office manager quite a bit, Reggie, for any of you who know Tucson. So when time came to start an atheist agnostic meeting, I talked with Reggie, and she said, yeah, start it here, which was really fun to have the atheist agnostic meeting right there in the center of theistic AA. So this at this assembly, I talked about Scott, the at-large alcoholic, talking about Bill and Bob. I mean, he knew. So we go and we listened, and he told his story. At the end of the speaker meeting, the guy got up to close the meeting, and he closed the meeting with the Lord's Prayer. He doesn't know. He doesn't have a clue that that might be a problem. So how do we get that message back? Because the real difficulty is at the group level, not at the upper reaches of the service. Oh, lower reaches. You know, we just have these traditions. And, I understand that, the things that happened for me when I got sober, I don't want to change those. Those are critical for me. And if I got sober in a meeting and I really believed that the Lord's Prayer was that important, I would resist changing it. And I understand that. But there's more message that needs to get carried. So I'm going to shift gears radically here. I'm going to go back to 1976. I was studying for my bachelor's in journalism at the University of Michigan. I tried being a reporter and I didn't like it, so I did something else. But I took a class from a guy, Dr. Everett Rogers, in Communication of Innovation. And this class is very important, and it's germane to what happens here. Because what he did is he studied how do things get implemented. He was working on trying to help health services in India implement family planning. And it was really difficult to do, so they were looking at how does this happen? And what they realized is that there's a series of adopters, meaning that a group of 5% of people will adopt, usually the freaks. Freaks start first, then they're followed by the opinion leaders. And then after the opinion leaders adopt, the rest of society is more inclined to do it. So what they realize is getting to the opinion leaders is how we need to make this stuff work. Now, I enjoyed that class. I loved that we used to go drinking after class, and my tweed jacket with the patches on, very academic. It was really sexy stuff, man. Turned out in 2002, this guy was hailed as a genius. Now, the point I want to make, and I'll finish, promise. So I got known in Tucson. I started this meeting, so I'm in the bathroom on a bathroom break at this last assembly. And this guy, Johnny, comes up to me, "Hey, you're Fred, right?" I say, "Yeah. You started that atheist agnostic meeting, didn't you?" I said, "Well, me and some other people, because it wasn't me." He says, "Yeah, I just want you to know that I know about that now." So here's what's happened. If you're a GSR, you go to an assembly, you rub up against other GSRs, you get to know each other, and then that gets communicated back. So John's talking to the GSRs on these panels. They'll take that word back. This is what I heard. Doesn't mean necessarily that they change their votes. My home group said, "No, we're not going to, every AA group is secular. We're not going to put that in there." So I went to the assembly and I dutifully carried that message. I didn't, my job as a GSR is to carry my home group's message. But what happens is that when you get to these assemblies, then you get to rub up against people. Now, I at one point was on the administrative committee, and the administrative secretary, Kathy, was a convention chair. She had to pull together a panel for inclusive. She asked me to speak about atheist agnostics on a panel on inclusivity. But that's because she knew me personally. Because I had gotten into service, I went, I drove, I spent those time rolling my eyes while that stuff was going on. But she got to know me, and that was how I was able to get onto a panel to speak at the assembly, because she knew me that I was an atheist agnostic. And at that time, I wasn't even sure, but I really wanted that message carried. So that's important. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Jennifer, member of AA. My sponsor knew that I hated that Lord's Prayer and I hated all that religious stuff being spoken about in the meetings instead of the brass tacks on how you stay away from a drink. So she dragged me into general service, because in general service they don't end with the Lord's Prayer. There's the responsibility statement, blah, blah, blah. And through these committees, I was able to get really close to Alcoholics Anonymous in the committee meetings, because I couldn't get close to Alcoholics Anonymous in meetings. And that became a really bizarre part of my life. And as I stayed sober on these committees, I discovered, I went from committee to committee to committee, because they say that you're supposed to, in theory, stay for 2 years committed to the committee, and then you can pass on to another committee. And I discovered the Public Information Committee and the Cooperation with the Professional Communities Committee. And I liked that a lot, because I had a commitment where for 25 minutes once a month, I got to speak to this group of young people who would end up in this, I guess it was a 3-quarter house. I'm not sure of the speech. It might have been a halfway house. But several of these people were there for more than 1 month. And the first question they ask is, well, it's a religious organization, isn't it? How are you going to end this meeting today? Every single time. That was the first question. I don't believe in God. And I was able to share, hey, a lot of meetings are like that. I was able to, because the longer I stayed in these committee meetings, the more I learned about the traditions. So I was able to explain to them, well, each meeting can end whatever way they want to. And I just choose, this is just me, I choose not to attend those meetings. All right, okay, I fibbed a little bit because at that point in time, almost all the meetings end with the Lord's Prayer, whatever. But I stuck with this committee because I got to be face to face with people who were just coming into AA. And a lot of them, sometimes, I also was lucky enough to spend 30 minutes sharing with prisoners, people who were just released from prison. And if you join the H&I committee, they'll give you hey, this is your format. And yep, it's going to say, end with the Lord's Prayer. But if you're on that committee, you have a voice, and you can say, you know, I vote that we not push people out of the rooms. 2 years at a time, there was no chair for the CPC committee. All right, I'll do it. Anyway, whatever, I was happy to do it because it just filled this hole in me that attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings left in me. And I got to learn a lot about the traditions, and I got to travel around a lot and meeting a lot of other people from other places. And sometimes they ask me why I walk out of the room when at an AA meeting I don't stay for the Lord's Prayer. It's a progressive thing. I hear it. It's a progressive thing. And somehow that orange pamphlet, Pathways, was passed. And the Grapevine has so many awesome things, like the Spiritual Awakenings books. AA Grapevine, Spiritual Awakenings 2, has lots of stories about long-term sober atheist people. We just have to dig into the AA stuff, and the Grapevine especially. Anyway, I'm Jazz. Thanks.
I'm Gary, and I'm an alcoholic. And thanks for your presentation. I continue to be my favorite topic, and you know, because I haven't come around. And but what I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous and in the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous is I managed to spend some decades in general service. And I remember going to my first assembly. Now, my disease is one of loneliness, the ability to walk in a room with hundreds of people in it and be totally alone. I don't know if anybody else can identify with that. But what happened for me is my sponsor introduced me to our delegate. And she came up to me and she said, "Oh, you're a new GSR, huh?" And I said, yeah. And she says, "Well, I'll tell you what, Gary. In general service, you will develop the heart of a butterfly and the skin of a rhinoceros." Well, I don't know about the heart part, but I am the very essence of rhinocerosity. And that's a direct result of being a participant in this thing that we call Alcoholics Anonymous. And the third slice, you know, we got 3 slices of pie here, and we have unity, we have recovery, and we have service. And I want it all. And the only way I know to get it all is to be of service in Alcoholics Anonymous. And as a direct result of those years in service and in H&I and I've worn many, many hats in AA. I know thousands of us, literally thousands of us. And that's not who came in. When my who do I know list when I came to AA, I could count on one hand. And that's the joy of this thing. So it's not, and AA could have gotten along really well without me. I'm certain of it. General service would have marched right on. But I couldn't get along without it. I needed that thing. But I didn't know I needed it until I went and did it. And I think that's the key. So jump on in, head for the middle of the bed, not the edge. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Steve, and I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, there's some simple ways of service work. I know they talk about the 5% of us who do service within AA, but I'm sorry. And so by simply sharing at meetings and not staying closeted is one way to do it, because you let newcomers know that there is hope for them outside of the God word. And then if you go on to secularAA.org, you can learn how to start a meeting. And that can be done at clubhouses, sometimes more difficult, or simply finding another place, a hospital, a Universalist church, whatever, to look to do that. But outside of the meetings, is the way that I've had the most import for becoming a CPC. Once I realized that that was cooperation with professional community and that I was going to be talking to professionals like doctors, therapists, and HR people, for instance, I was able to talk about AA, but also secular AA, by saying that there's specialized meetings that we have in AA for young people, women's meetings, so forth, and then secular. And by far and large, the most interest that I've found is that as soon as I've said secular AA, suddenly their ears perk. And so it's a way to spread the word to people before they even get into AA, because these are the people that are going to be telling them that, you know, they might have a drinking problem and here's a way to get help, and that AA isn't what they may have heard before. That's it. Thanks.
I'm Angela. Thank you guys so much for doing this panel. I think it's really important. Technically, I am the InReach coordinator for secular AA. The position's only existed since January, so there's a lot of learning going on. And so I love hearing this, and I would love to hear what other people are doing. So if you are doing something in your community similar to what they're doing, if you could email me at InReach, just INREACH, at secularAA.net. That would be helpful so that we can try to pass it on to other people that are trying to do the same in their area. One of the other things about the H&I in our area, a couple of women from our group started taking a meeting out to one of the local prisons there, and they just went in taking a meeting. They didn't say what group they were from. They were just going to take one, but they took in a secularly formatted meeting, and it's really popular among the women there. They love that meeting and try to attend it as often as they can. This group also asked me to come and speak, and there's a way in Idaho that you can do that without going through all of the hoops, where they do a slight background check, apparently not as intensive. But they were confused when they called me back because they didn't know that there was a secular meeting there, and the person that coordinates all of the meetings is the religious services coordinator. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you're doing one and you want to say secular AA, you might, be aware of that, because it seems to be the case in a lot of states that it's the religious services coordinator that coordinates the AA meetings that come into the institutions. And that's it. Thank you.
Hey, Angela, why don't you write your email address on the whiteboard up there so people can copy it down? We got 5 minutes left.
Like that last story, it reminds me of something that one of our members, Jerry, found out when he proposed a new meeting in a church, the Christ Chalice Church or something like that. And he was very upfront and said to the pastor, Reverend, by the way, this is agnostic meeting. Most of our members aren't believers. And the pastor smiled and said, well, most of mine aren't either, I thought that. But I very much appreciate my home group is We Agnostics in Tempe, and I appreciate the message for how service work can get us more engaged in, and especially general service and intergroup service. I was GSR for the group, and at the time, when I would go to the area assemblies, I felt like I was the only agnostic in the room. And also at the time, I used to attend a number of other agnostic AA meetings here in Phoenix, and there just wasn't as much engagement. I would seem to be the only GSR and it was lonely, It was so it's wonderful to hear that we can indeed be represented, and along the lines of the secular designation at the November assembly. Yes. We agnostics proposed that, we didn't go down the secular path. We took a different tact. We said that all meetings that close with the Lord's Prayer be designated as Christian format, period. And because that completely takes off the table many of the arguments, the responses that you've got. Oh, all of our meetings are secular and blah, blah. And for us, the point was, well, this way, we don't catch people of other faiths off guard when we close with a particular prayer of a particular religion. So we thought it was a very simple solution. It didn't get very far. Go figure. The other side benefit of that is that, and I wasn't used to Arizona AA, I hadn't been to a single meeting in this state that didn't close with the Lord's Prayer. And so to suddenly have meeting books where every single meeting is listed as CF, Christian format, except for, let's say, 32 of them, might, raise some awareness as to a need. Thanks.
I just wanted to mention, somebody was talking about how do you start a meeting and how do you get it listed, and I just wanted to mention that we started our meeting 5 years ago, and I find it really helpful to have at least a few old-timers, and especially people who are involved in intergroup, to be part of starting a meeting. Because we had absolutely no problem with getting our meeting listed, because 3 of us in that intergroup, I was the treasurer, and one of them was the office manager, and we're part of the secular meeting that we started. So that's always been my recommendation for starting a new meeting. Try and find some old farts that have been around forever that won't put up with the bullshit, and won't put up with that stuff, and get involved in intergroups because it makes a difference.
Thanks, John. And can I assume correctly, am I assuming correctly, that most of you who are here are doing a fair amount of service work in your own home groups? Otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. But the easiest thing to do is get involved in your home group. Make coffee, take out the trash, do whatever it is. So take the information back to your home groups and use that to get more people involved in that. Let's thank our panel.